Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Know Before You Go, Botswana Safaris, presented by Nat Hab Expedition Leader Ona Basimane. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Over to you, Ona.
Okay, is that my turn?
It's your time, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Welcome to the Know Before You Go webinar about a Botswana safari. I'm privileged to be here. I'm privileged to be presenting this to us at the beginning of the year, as a lot of you should be traveling this way or are planning to travel this way in the future. As Rob said, my name is Ona Basimane. I've been guiding. I was born in Maun. Maun is a small town. It's like the tourism frontier, just outside the Morembe Game Reserve, outside the Okavango Delta. So when we do the secluded Botswana trips, or most of the Botswana safaris, at the end of the safari, everybody almost flies out of Maun, heading back home, or some people start in Maun and then finish on the other side. But most of the trips end up in Maun. That's the town where I was born. I started guiding in 2007 here in the Okavango Delta. And then about 8 years later, in 2015, I joined Natural Habitat Adventures as one of the expedition leaders. And besides leading the safaris in Botswana, I also lead the safaris in Zambia. Obviously, the secluded Botswana trips start in Zambia, as well as the photo trips also start in Zambia. I've led some photographic trips, Nat Hab photo safaris in Namibia as well. And my biggest interest as a safari guide has always been wildlife photography. It's a hobby that has become an extension of what I do. And that's the reason why I also lead the photo trips for Nat Hab. And I'm always pleased. It has helped me a lot to garner a lot of wildlife knowledge, because with wildlife photography, you spend a lot of time anticipating the next move, anticipating the next shot, anticipating what the animal is going to do. And in the process, you end up accumulating knowledge based on your observation with wildlife. So I'm going to take us through a few pictures that I have from Botswana, from the trips that I've led with Natural Habitat Adventures through Botswana. And basically, that will, in the process, hopefully, will give you an idea about the wildlife and what to expect on your safari coming to Botswana. All right, Botswana's got an incredible population of leopards. Northern Botswana, especially, we get some great leopard pictures. Here, the picture that you may see on the screen here is probably one of the classic pictures of leopards up on trees, dead trees especially, and with clear blue skies in the background. And sometimes during the dry season, leopards also get very close to camp, and are much more predictable. Also in the dry season, the grasses are shorter, the vegetation is drier, so you're able to spot leopards sometimes from a distance. And not only you, but other animals are also able to spot leopards from a distance. And in the process, they could alert you and you can know where the leopards are. And some camps have water holes in front of their camp. And then during the dry season, that water hole tends to attract animals, and in the process, you also get to see leopards being forced to come down to drink as well. And there is often an opportunity at a camp like Gomoti where we often see leopards coming down to drink at the camp water hole. And then, of course, Botswana is blessed with it's the major stronghold for the population of wild dogs. And northern Botswana, especially, hosts about 30%, 25 to 30% of the world's population of wild dogs is in northern Botswana. And if you do a safari in Botswana, you stand a very good chance of seeing one and hopefully photographing dogs as well. And then the denning process is in the winter. They usually den from May to about August, if late. Some packs will den as late as August. And then during that time, their movement tend to be isolated, tend to be around the den area. So they don't move as much because the puppies are always in the den. So they're very predictable in that sense that they hunt and then go back to the den. And then when the pups are big enough and we reckon that it's safe to visit the den without disturbing it because they're sensitive breeders, we often visit the den and get to photograph the puppies when they're very young. And eventually we get to see the puppies when they're now following the adults around. And again, those are opportunities to photograph them. Going forth, lions. I think almost everybody that comes on safari expects to see a lion. And I think to a certain extent, Botswana does very, very well. We've got a very healthy population of lions. And I don't remember a safari that I've done without anybody seeing a lion. If that happens, I'm still looking forward to I'm looking for the first safari that would be like that, but it rarely happens. I haven't done such a safari without lions. So we got a good population of lions. We see lions very regularly, season in and season out, really. Whether it's the rainy season or the dry season, you still see lions around. And the good thing about northern Botswana is that some parts of the Okavango Delta where you get seasonal floodplains, you stand an opportunity to sometimes photograph lions walking on shallow water, which is something that is very unique. And I can say the same about wild dogs as well. That's one thing that makes Botswana impressive, is photographing wild dogs and these predators that are usually not in water, and sometimes they're forced to cross water, and you can photograph them with water around them. That's another impressive thing. And then, of course, the bird life is impressive. Botswana in general is blessed with a lot of birds. There are some resident birds, and then in the summer you get summer visitors. That some of them migrating from as far as Europe, some of them coming from within Africa and migrating down to Southern Africa, either for food or some of them to breed. And of course, some of them are very colorful, including the lilac-breasted roller, which I think is probably the most photogenic bird, and probably the most photographed of birds is the lilac-breasted roller. I'm also guilty of that. Going forth, Botswana has got the highest population of elephants and the highest concentration. In fact, the highest concentration of elephants is northern Botswana. And you stand, when you come through Botswana, regardless of what time of the year, you stand a good chance of seeing elephants. However, the dry season gives you more. You get higher concentration of elephants along the Chobe River when we do the boat cruise in the Chobe River. And then as you go to other places, the elephants tend to congregate where there is water. And that's where they also feed with the green along the river and woodlands. And you get to see a lot of elephants along the river as well. And in a lot of places where they also have water holes, again, elephants are going to be always around places with water holes. And that's pretty much it from my side. And I'm going to be waiting up for questions to answer as many questions as possible. That will hopefully keep you in a better place when you're ready to do your safari in Botswana. Over to you, Rob.
All right, thank you so much. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. So, um, can we expect to see giraffes?
Oh, definitely. One of the camps that we use for these trips is Gomoti. And the Gomoti area is a big browse country. So giraffes love to browse on acacia trees. So that's the best place usually to see giraffes. And then we do see them pretty much at all the other camps, but Gomoti gives you more. And the fact that Gomoti is this sort of old historic floodplain system with these acacia islands means that a lot of time you can see giraffes moving from one island to another in the open, so you get more photographic opportunities. But pretty much all the camps that we go to give you giraffes.
All right, thank you so much. So now, if we want to use local currency, for instance, if we're visiting villages, what currency should we use?
So the US dollars is pretty much accepted everywhere, and people have no problem converting US dollars. So for you, because you probably only do these safaris, you might go through one or two countries. There's probably no need to change your money into the local currencies. Because if you're going to go to Zambia, then you want to use the kwacha, then Botswana uses the pula as a different currency. So it's probably very convenient to rather keep it to the US dollars and maybe perhaps bring some smaller denominations that you can use, maybe $5 and tens and ones.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. So, what are the water levels like in the Delta? Do you think they'll be uh, high enough in May and June?
So it's been an interesting year in the sense that we are monitoring the water entering Botswana at a place called Rundu, where the Okavango River enters Botswana. There's a station there that measure the volumes of water coming in. So everybody has been interested in watching the graph, a comparative graph for between the years, and as far back as 2015. So there's all this series of graphs that are set up, and we thought we were going to get what looked like was going to be the biggest flood since maybe it was comparing well with the big one that we had that no one really got to experience. That's the one during COVID in 2020. We experienced a very nice flood. So the graph was going well up until the critical point where it had to pick up in beginning of March, but it didn't quite pick up. So it's gone sort of kind of average, not very low, but average. So I'm expecting an average flood, to be honest, come May, June in the Delta.
Great, thank you. So, let's talk about clothing for a minute. Do you recommend anything in particular? Should we stay away from bright colored clothing, maybe?
Yeah, people always talk about clothing and that it startles animals, it has an effect on animals. But the fact is, the animals that actually do see color are the primates. But while that's said, and you do encounter primates, I think it's also nice to just wear natural colors so that you blend in with the environment and blend in with your background being the tree line or just being in the camp rather than standing out brightly. So that's the main reason. So natural colors are encouraged.
All right. And what about insects? Are we going to have problems with mosquitoes? Should we bring insect repellent?
So people like to take that extra precaution, but the camps provide precautions. There is always an insect repellent in the camp. There's always an insect repellent in the vehicles. And then in the rooms, there's also mosquito nets during summer. So the insects are usually much more active during the rainy season, especially at the beginning of the rainy season. That's when we have mosquitoes. These are the ones that we often worry about. But there is all these precautions in place already. But sometimes people like to bring perhaps maybe their personal choice of an insect repellent. You may bring it, but we also know that we provide some in the camps as well as even on game drives. When you go along game drives, the vehicles also carry some as well.
What about binoculars? Should we bring some binoculars, or are those something, like something that you would provide for us?
So we don't provide binoculars. So I'd encourage everybody to bring their own binoculars and their own personal choice of binoculars, as we don't provide any on this side.
Great, thank you. So what about footwear? Should we bring hiking boots? Is there a specific kind of shoe that we should bring?
So you might bring maybe one or two pairs of shoes, hiking boots, because occasionally we're gonna go on a walking safari. So any shoes that are comfortable and closed and can walk you on a hard terrain and perhaps maybe spiky terrain, they've got a hard sole underneath, then they're perfectly fine. So they could be hiking boots or just shoes that you're comfortable with. And then in some instances during the day, during the downtime in camp, you want to walk to the swimming pool from your room. You can't have to keep on wearing hiking boots all the time. So maybe flip flops as well, or even open shoes as well.
Great, thank you. What about laundry? Will we have the opportunity to wash clothes at the camp?
Oh, good question. So all the camps that we go to provide laundry services. So and it's the same. It's usually weather permitting because a lot of them they usually hang them out in the sun. There's no dryer. They sun dry them. Most of the time they return your laundry the same day. They pick it up in the morning from your room when you're out on game drive. When you get back from game drive, usually in the evening, when you after dinner, you should find your laundry back in your room. So each camp, every single camp that we go to provide laundry services.
Wow, that's terrific. Thank you for mentioning that. So what if I have a special diet? Say I'm a vegetarian. Is that going to be an issue?
Not at all. Not at all. Good question, that one. It's never an issue. What we always need to know is we need to know this in advance. So when you book, I'm sure there's a section where they ask about all this information. And once we have this information on this side, the camps can prepare accordingly. We've had all sorts of requests in terms of dietary, some special dietary requirements, and camps have always done well to accommodate those. And the camp chefs are usually trained for such special requests, whether it's vegetarian, whether it's vegan. There's all sorts of different meals on offer for people with special dietary requirements.
Good to know. Thank you so much. So, are we just going to be driving through the park, or do we do any walking? And how much walking is done on these trips?
We try and get walking done at some point for two reasons. One, to get people off the vehicle and experience nature without the sound of the engine, and also to experience smaller things that you often miss when you are driving and chasing wild dogs and stuff like that. So a walking safari is done so that you can get to appreciate life at the micro scale, looking at tracks, looking at different signs, small things that you would always miss from a vehicle. And we always try and squeeze that in and find a way and a place to do that. And then another reason perhaps is also to give people a little exercise. It's often difficult to get an exercise here because some people would be exercising very regularly back home, and then they get here and you can't really do much. So we try and find a way to do a walking safari. But it's often a combination of both, just trying to get a little bit of air in our lungs, as well as also appreciating nature at a small scale. So, and this is usually done at a particular camp, depending on the season. Some camps during the wet season, when it's raining, they are thick. A camp like Linyanti is often very thick during that time, so it may be difficult to walk because your visibility is quite reduced, so it may not be safe. And then, so we try and pick camps that are open and allow such an activity to be carried out.
Great, thank you. So, will the guides be telling us about animal behaviors? Do they have a lot of knowledge for us?
Oh, absolutely. That's the reason why you have an expedition leader or guide with you on these trips. The guides are trained and to know and to interpret the behavior that they see, to interpret and give you background knowledge that they have about the particular animals that you're going to be encountering there. And their knowledge is not just limited to the wildlife. Most of our all our expedition leaders are very knowledgeable. So you can discuss whether it's conservation trends around the world, geopolitical situations around countries, or political situations around countries. The guys are well versed in a lot of topics. They are, I should say, worldly on many levels. So yeah, they're going to be there to interpret all that with you.
So, how big is my group going to be, and how many guides am I going to have?
So secluded Botswana trip, which is a non-photographic departure, maximum has 7 guests. And the reason why we take 7 guests is that you've got 3 rows of seats in the vehicle. And with these 3 rows, you can have 2 people having window seats on either side, and that makes 6 in the back. And then the passenger seat with the driver on the driver's cabin is also available. That's where the 7th person can sit. And then as you go along, you're going to rotate seats so that nobody's confined to a particular seat, because the view is often different at each seat. That's why we encourage people to rotate. So 7 people and rotating within the vehicle. And then the photographic departures, we take maximum of 8 people. And then we split this over 2 vehicles. The reason for this is that if you've got 4 people who are taking pictures, they should have each row to themselves. And then that's 3 people in the back. And then the 4th person will sit with the driver up front on the passenger seat. That way people can then rotate back and forth side by side, depending on where the subject they're photographing is on the with respect to the vehicle. And then that way, the person that's sitting up front will also get an opportunity, because then they rotate. We encourage rotating in the vehicle so that people are not confined to the same spot all the time. So then, as with each activity, people rotate back and forth, and then the person that's sitting in the back would maybe get an opportunity to go sit in the front, and the one that was sitting in the front will get a chance to go to the back as well.
Great, thank you so much. So you talked about photo trips. What type of cameras do you recommend? And we know weight can be an issue. What kind of accessories should we bring, like a tripod or lenses?
Okay, so in terms of choice of photographic gear, this is a difficult one to encourage someone for several reasons. The choice of camera is a personal choice, and it depends on what the person wants to photograph, what they can afford, and what they can afford to carry. And then also, where are they going? If I'm going to a place where I'm going to do a lot of landscape photography, then I'm also going to need to take, besides the zoom lens, I'm also going to need to take a wide angle lens, because then I want to take the landscape pictures and wide pictures. And then besides this, it's also an issue of what does one wants to photograph. So if you're going to be photographing action and you're going to be photographing wildlife, then perhaps maybe a versatile lens is what I would encourage to be there as well. Maybe as a standard, maybe something like 100 to 400. It's quite a very versatile lens. There's also the 60 to 600 that people have. There's also the 80 to 400 lens. I think that's a Nikon lens. There's also a 60 to 600. So just that range as well. And then some people specialize in birds and they want to photograph birds. And in that case, maybe a 600 millimeter lens is what I would encourage as well. Some people would even take an 800 millimeter lens. That I would also encourage. But if they're not taking landscape pictures at all, then there's no need for them to bring a wide angle lens.
Great, thank you. So we
And
know
then
that.
perhaps I forgot to touch on tripods and stuff. So we have monopods with us when we do these photo trips. We carry monopods depending on the number of people. We carry, if we got 7 people, 8 people, we'll carry 7 or 8 monopods with us. And I guess they may come handy. But then if some people really, want to get something more, I don't know how I can put this. If, let's say, it's landscape photography and they really want to capture something, they've got a particular shot in mind that they want to get, and they have an idea of how they can achieve that, and they feel they may need more than the monopod that we are providing, then they may bring that as an extra. There's always a room in the vehicle for that. And we also provide bin bags as well for lenses, for stabilizing lenses as well. And when we do this photo trips, they'll always be in the vehicle, and people also get to use those.
Great, thank you. So can you tell us when the wet season is and what can we expect to see differently in the wet season as opposed to the dry season?
So let's describe Botswana this way. So the wet season, we need to be careful here. The wet season has to mean the flood season when the Okavango Delta has water, because that usually happens in winter when the rains are not there. And then the dry season, usually we refer to when the delta, most of the delta is dry, and that's usually when the rainy season is here. I hope that clears it up. So now, if we talk about the wet season in essence of floods, the floods start arriving around about May in the camps that we go to, and then they proceed sort of southwards, going down southwards, southeast, towards the floodplain side, the bottom side of the delta, and eventually Maun town, which is on the fringes, receiving its flood maybe around about July. So that's the wet season.
Got it.
And in terms of wildlife there, and in terms of wildlife in the wet season, so the wildlife doesn't change much. Perhaps what changes is the background, because in the wet season, what you'd get now is that there's water everywhere. So right now is the dry season, and you got animals congregating around water holes and permanent water sources. And then once the floods arrive, these animals tend to disperse a bit. So they're not confined to specific places. So you don't have to drive to a particular spot to see a hippo. You drive along the river, there's often spots with different parts of hippos along the river. And then you don't drive to a particular spot to find elephants, because now water is everywhere and they drink everywhere. And then perhaps one thing that is also worth noting about the flood is that then the water birds, aquatic birds, become more prevalent. They are everywhere. You get to see them much more often, and you photograph them in their natural environment because they're not being pushed off by the dry season.
Great. Thank you so much for addressing that. So, are the safari vehicles open or are they covered?
So we use open safari vehicles, which maximize game viewing, because then we're able to see the animals well. And also because we don't have air conditioning in the vehicles, it helps to have a vehicle that is open, to allow air to circulate through the vehicle and somehow keep us cool. But the main thing is that they're open and they allow for good game viewing.
So we don't need a jacket on those early chilly July mornings then?
I'll go again with the question.
So it doesn't get cool enough to need a jacket on, like, say, early in the morning on a July day?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to need a jacket, winter months, because the temperatures can go as low as to about maybe 37, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. In some days, we tend to, during winter like that, sometimes what happens is you get maybe 3, 4 cold fronts and lasting 4 or 5 days at a time. And when that happens, the temperatures drop to about, like I say, about 38, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So you definitely need some warm clothes. But what we also do, in addition to you bringing a jacket, is that we're also going to provide you with a hot water bottle in the vehicle to keep you warm. And then we also provide ponchos, which are basically lined with a windbreaker on the outside. And then there's a thin blanket lining on the inside. And they also come very handy.
Great. Thank you for letting us know that. So, will there be any opportunities for us to see any cultural or historical sites in Botswana?
Maybe in Botswana, not so much, but at the beginning of the trips, because all of them start in Zambia, there's a local village that we visit, and we do this village tour, which is often we say it's optional, but people always take it on. People are always interested to go see the village and interact with the locals. So that's where we do the traditional village setting, and that's the village visit that we do, a cultural visit that we do on this trip.
Great. Thank you. So, can you take us through a typical day on safari, how early we get up, and how a day would unfold for us?
Okay, so the idea is to try and get out just before the sun comes out, where it's just light enough for you not to miss a leopard next to the road, but it's still early enough for the animals to be active. So we leave around that time. So basically, you would wake up an hour before then, and then you got half an hour to get ready in your room. Somebody's gonna come and wake you up. You got half an hour to get ready in your room, and then after that, they come and escort you. After half an hour, you go through for a little breakfast, tea and coffee, and maybe some a muffin there, and maybe some cereal. And then we head out on game drive. And at this time now, it's light enough when the sun, just before the sun comes out. And then you head out on game drive. You're going to be out there while it's still nice and cool and the animals are active and moving. And then as it warms up at a certain point, then some animals now start coming down to the river, like the elephants, for example, start coming down to the river. And then that's pretty much the second half of your game drive. And this should be around about 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And usually we go back to camp around about that time, 10 o'clock, between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. But again, we always encourage you to be flexible because sometimes at 11 o'clock, when you're almost ready to go to camp, as you turn around or just before you get into camp, you come across a leopard hunting. Boom, he's hunting the opposite direction to where you're going. So you got no choice. You're going to have to turn around if you want to see some action. And then you could end up going to camp an hour later than you had planned to. And we always encourage people to be flexible about that. And then that's the morning game drive. And then you head back to camp. And there's going to be brunch, usually about 11:30, 12 o'clock. You're going to have brunch in camp. And then there's a bit of a downtime where now it's very hot. The animals are seeking shade and hiding under the trees. They're not moving that much. And then you can also have a downtime until it cools down again in the afternoon, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock. That's when you meet again for a little tea. And then from there, head out on a game drive. This game drive now should keep you out there until about after the sun has gone down. At some point, you'll stop and photograph the sun, or depending if you're not following some action. And then after the sun has gone down, then you start driving back to camp. At this point, it's now quite dark. So often the guys will bring out some the searchlight, the spotlight, and they start shining through the bushes to look for the nocturnal animals. And then that will get you back to camp around about 7 o'clock, 7:30, and then there's dinner, and then people go to bed. So that's the typical day out here.
Great. Thank you for walking us through that. So, let's talk about camp for a couple minutes. Um, what kind of conveniences can we expect? Will there be a bathroom in our tent, for instance?
So each camp is going to have some in-suite facilities. You're going to have a bathroom inside there and a shower. And some camps even go extra. You're going to get an outside shower even. You're going to get sometimes an outside bathtub even. But yeah, each room is going to have in-suite facilities.
What about power? Am I going to be able to charge my cell phone, my batteries?
Absolutely, you're going to be able to do that because there's power in the rooms, and then they've got the outlets, the adapters that should take any adapter should be able to be used there. So whether it's the European adapter or the American adapter, they have a universal charging point where it's got all several ports that could charge anything. Even a USB port would be there to charge if you're charging using USB ports. And then also in the main lounge, sometimes people like to sit in the main lounge during the day. In some camps, that's where the Wi-Fi is, so people like to sit there. There's also some charging ports. There's power there as well.
Great to know. Thank you. So, what about food? What kind of food can we expect to eat? Are we going to eat local cuisine?
So in some days, you will be served local cuisine, but the majority of the time is an international menu that people are familiar with and therefore comfortable with. That's the idea. But we also would love for you to taste the local cuisine. And some days in some camps, you will be served the local cuisine as well.
All right. Thank you so much. So, just to clarify, we're going to go out in the morning and the afternoon on safaris?
Absolutely. So there's a morning game drive and then an afternoon game drive.
Oh, that's exciting. So, is it rare for us to actually see a kill in the wild?
I have to say, kills are fairly rare. Um, you sometimes, but then some people could come on a safari so many times and they don't see a single kill. And somebody could come and boom, their first safari on the way from the airstrip after landing, and then they get a kill. So it's like that. It's just the luck of the draw. But they're not a regular thing. They're not something that I go on safari knowing that I'm going to see a kill myself. Even myself leading all these safaris, but I don't see as many kills in a year as I would love to. So they're fairly rare.
So, how safe are the camps? Are we going to be okay there?
Camps are very safe as long as you abide by the camp's safety rules. Each camp is unique, either by location, its geography, and the set of dangers that may be presented. Some camps may have buffaloes roaming through them at night. Some camps may have elephants. Some camps may have what do you call them, hippos going through the camp at night. But when we get to each camp, you're given a safety briefing, and each safety briefing is relevant to that particular camp. And it's important that we abide by what is expected of us um, by the camp and by our guide. If we do that, then it's absolutely safe.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So, let's talk about vaccinations for a second. What kind of shots do I need to prepare to come down there for?
Sorry, I missed your question there.
What kind of vaccinations or shots do I need to get in order to travel to Botswana?
So Botswana has no particular restrictions on vaccinations. I know once in a while, some other countries, it often flares up in Zambia, where once in a while they start demanding yellow fever cards and vaccination proof. But in the case of Botswana, there are no such restrictions. At least up to now, there haven't been such restrictions. Even COVID people, they no longer really require proof of vaccination for COVID.
Great, thank you. So, can you talk about maybe just some of your favorite animals that you've been able to see when you've been leading trips out there?
Absolutely. That gets me excited. I love wild dogs. I love wild dogs, and I feel blessed to be guiding in Botswana, where I get fairly regular sightings of wild dogs. And sometimes I do miss them. We go through camps, we go through a whole safari, we don't see the dogs, and that's normal. But when we see them, I'm always very excited to see wild dogs. And I think guiding in Botswana is such a blessing that you photograph the wild dogs in the sort of the environment and the background and the habitat that they're in. Photographing wild dogs in the Okavango Delta doesn't compare to anything in the world. You can get dogs anywhere, but photographing them in Botswana is always going to be unique. And then, of course, elephants. We get lots of elephants here. I always look forward to seeing elephants out and about, whether it's breeding herds, whether it's lone bulls. And there's always so much to interpret and share with guests about these animals because they're always active. There's always so much to interpret. There's always so much that you see. And there's so much background information that is out there that you can always share about the species. And also the fact that, wild dogs are endangered. So it always feels good to see them while they're endangered. But also, ecotourism is about conserving these animals. So one way or another, sharing sightings with guests of wild dogs means that we somehow contribute to their conservation.
Great, thank you. So, will there be any night drives or any opportunities to photograph the night sky?
Absolutely. When people are keen to and they've got the right gear for it, we do offer night sky photography, and we choose places, and it has to be at the right time of the month as well. If it's a full moon, then you may struggle to get some shots to do that. So it has to be the right time of the month as well. And then night drives also, we offer night drives. It's always nice to be able to get out there and you choose the camps that are very. I prefer choosing camps that are productive, where I know that it's not going to be underwhelming. So a camp like Gomoti is very productive to go out at night and do a night drives in, and there's always something to see at night. So yeah, we offer both. In short.
So, if I come there and I want to go to multiple trips, is it possible to schedule back-to-back trips in the area?
Absolutely. Absolutely, you can. So the trips sort of run back to back on their own, the secluded Botswana trips. So you can time it in a way that you might end up just maybe getting 1 day break and then flying back and studying another one. So you absolutely can. There's several trips throughout the year. Study some of the trips, the secluded Botswana trips, pretty much starting in May or end of April, all the way through to beginning of November. So there's trips almost every 3 days when there are no cancellations. So you're always going to be able to find another trip to hop onto after the last one. You just have to make the necessary arrangement with our booking team.
Great. That is so great to know. Thank you so much. Just a couple more questions. Is the water safe for us to drink? Do we need bottled water, maybe to brush our teeth even?
Yeah, so the water is very safe here to drink. The water is treated by reverse osmosis, so it's very, very clean. And that's the water that we provide. And we keep that water in the camp. We keep extra in the vehicle when we're out on game drive. So it's absolutely safe to drink.
What about shampoo and soap and those types of toiletries? Should I plan to bring my own, or is that something that we can get there?
So there's such amenities in the rooms that are provided in the rooms, but then sometimes people have their own personal choices when it comes to that, and they want to bring their own. If you want to, you may bring your own, but always know that there's some in each room. There's always going to be a shampoo, a shower gel, maybe by soap as well. They're always going to be in the rooms as well.
So at the end of a night at dinner, perhaps, is there going to be the opportunity to have a glass of wine or maybe a beer?
Oh, absolutely. Or pretty much any time of the day. There's always refreshments. In fact, at dinner, they always serve wine alongside dinner or any beverage of your choice. Sometimes before dinner, before we sit down, people will have a drink by the fire before we settle down for dinner. And then during dinner, they would have maybe some wine or a beer or any beverage that anybody would like to have. Even tea or coffee would be provided as well. And then this is also the case with game drives as well. On afternoon game drives, at the end, as the sun goes down, it's perhaps an opportunity to stop and watch the sun go down, photograph the sun from the ground, and then also just to stretch our legs a bit. And then the guide would also roll out his little mini bar. And then there's usually some beverages in there, some beer, some wines, or even cool drinks. So there's always opportunities for those.
Great. Thank you so much. What about besides the game drives? Will there be any other opportunities to learn or educate ourselves about the wildlife or conservation in the area?
Absolutely. So besides going out, sometimes guys give presentations in camp and teach you, like for example, when you're out in the Okavango Delta, guys often give presentations about the Okavango Delta and they do it in camp. as well as also when they're out there in the field. But there are some presentations that are sometimes done in camp.
Great. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Not so much, except to say that as Nat Hab, we do quite well to provide a lot of information at the beginning of the trip when people come through. And sometimes, if it comes across as being cumbersome, I'd like you folks to know that it's been put together just to help you, so that by the time you get on the trip, you're comfortable, and then your guide is also going to be there to go through everything again. Let's go through that material all the time, and it helps us quite a great deal. And you'll see by the time we get here, most of the questions that you worry about will often be answered by just reading through the material that you get from Natural Habitat Adventures prior to your trip.
Ona, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I would like to thank everybody who tuned in today. Now, if you are interested in information on how you can travel with Nat Hab, please give us a call at the number on your screen or send us an email at nathab.com, info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We will see you next time.